Now available on Tata Sky channel number 526.
It is a historic moment in the history of real estate. The RERA bill, Real Estate Regulatory Authority bill, has been passed by the Rajya Sabha, and our Magic Pictures editor Faye D'Souza is standing by in New Delhi. Faye, this is very, very good news. Advantage home buyer, isn't it?
Krishna, I can't stop smiling. What a fantastic day it is for the real estate sector. I believe it's pro sector as well. What a fantastic, massive day for the home buyer in our country. And a couple of things I'd like to point out, because we've been here in Delhi listening to that entire deliberation in the Rajya Sabha. It was a healthy discussion. It was a healthy debate. There were great points brought out. The Urban Development Minister, Honorable Venkaiah Naidu, in his typical, humor, talking about how the king is obviously the customer, the queen here is the real estate sector, and in order for them to live happily ever after, this bill was absolutely necessary. But very interesting points he did bring out, that we were actually wondering which way it's going to fall. The escrow account. Now that we didn't know whether it was going to be 50% or 70%. The government has settled at 70%. So a quick reminder to our viewers, an escrow account is an account where the builder is going to have to compulsorily place money that he collects in sales. He cannot divert 70% of that money to any other form of business. It has to be used for construction of the home that he has sold. That's a really, really important point. The other point we were wondering about, whether or not it's going to be prospective or retrospective. Anything under construction right now is going to have to register. He also talked about the jail term. That has been fairly contested. He said this. He said we're just doing it to deter people who violate our laws. He said obviously it will be used as a completely last resort. There will be warnings given, then there will be fines. And then if people still continue to not follow the rules of the appellate tribunal, which functions as a court, then, only then, will the jail term be exercised. He also talked about the fact that civil courts and consumer courts can continue to hear cases when it comes to the real estate sector. The appellate tribunals, which will be introduced in every state, will be added infrastructure, which again was a point that was contentious, and which again caused a little bit of confusion, because the earlier version that we saw said, maybe High Court will be left out, or maybe consumer courts will be left out, but that's not the case. It's been opened up across the board, and we just saw almost blanket support across the Rajya Sabha for this bill. The opposition giving credit to the government giving credit to the standing committee and the special committee. So it was a really healthy day in the Rajya Sabha, and the benefit really largely goes to the home buyer. I have with me, very interestingly, an advocate, Sudeepta Pal. He's been fighting a lot of home buyer cases. Congratulations. This is a big day for all of us, for anybody who wants to buy a home in this country. This is going to make a massive, massive difference. And I believe it's going to do well for the real estate sector as well. I mean, this will separate, from the point of view of a consumer, separate the good from the bad. And if I go out to buy a home, starting tomorrow, once the real estate regulator starts coming in, I'll be in possession of the facts, which I have not had up till now as a home buyer. Huge difference from where we were, yesterday or a month ago.
It's a huge relief for all the home buyers all across the country. This is something that everybody was waiting for. The problem had been that, there was no referral points. Whenever you file a case or you go to a builder, there is nothing that you can refer to. That's been the problem. So this bill brings in that declaration that will come through. By virtue of that declaration or the registration that they do, they will actually declare exactly what the project is going to look like. How many floors, how big the park would be, how big of a club it would be. I think now consumers and apartment owners will have a sigh of relief that at least they're going to get what they booked for.
I want to ask you, because I know that you also represented to the standing committee some points of your own. There is a little bit, we know that now that the centre has brought in the bill, each state will have to enact it. Each state will have to set up its version of the regulator with a chairman and an appellate tribunal. Now my question to you is this: can each state also interpret the bill in its own way, or is the bill as it stands right now a hard and fast rule?
See, this is a central law, but as we know, the land and buildings actually fall under the state law.
Yes.
So the state will have the final say. I mean, they might tweak the act a little here and there, like for instance, there was a huge amount of resistance in terms of the escrow amount.
Yes.
And maybe few states might do it in a slightly different manner.
So you think a couple of states will go below 70% as the escrow account?
Could be. But I'm sure with the kind of glare this particular act had, most of the state governments would be very, very reluctant to do anything. I think they should give this a try and then see if there is any teething problem, then they can come forward with some amendments later on.
Stay with us, Sarita. I also want to point out one more thing to the studio and the viewers back home. This morning I had a conversation with the Housing Secretary, Dr. Nandita Chatterjee. We were talking about the fact that, single window clearances, which is part of this bill. Now, one of the biggest problems that the real estate sector had, they said if you're going to regulate us, you should also be regulating the people who hand out these permissions to us, because that's where the delay is coming from. So there are two major points of delay. One is the fiscal problem, where the builder simply runs out of money. That will be solved with the escrow account. The second problem is if he doesn't get his environment clearance. What happens then? How do you solve that problem of delay? Dr. Chatterjee told us that basically the Urban Development Minister and the Ministry, along with the Aviation Ministry, along with the Heritage Ministry, all of these ministries are sitting together and working out model construction regulations, which will bring down the timing of getting clearances down to 26 days, so less than a month. So if you can get all of your clearances in less than a month, that should no longer be a cause for delay. And she was fairly confident that that can actually be actioned, she said, in the next couple of months, and that will be solved. And she also talked, we also heard the Urban Development Minister talk about infrastructure status for affordable housing, which will make a huge difference. He said that can only happen if the regulator is passed. And now that the regulator has been passed, infrastructure status for affordable housing can actually make a huge difference for finances. And we'll see prices of homes come down. If we see prices of homes come down, that will make again, I mean, this is something that every home buyer has been talking about, has been wishing for, that actually create more affordable housing for us.
I think we can't say much about whether the threshold prices would come down. But for sure, they'll be at a price at which they buy the product. It will remain there for some time. There could be some end correction.
I'm going to cut you off for a second. I'm told Niranjan Hiranandani is on the phone line right now. Mr. Hiranandani, congratulations to you. We now have a real estate regulator. I'm standing in front of Parliament, where we just heard that bill be passed. Huge sea change in the way we buy homes starting now. But a lot of the contentions that the industry has now been ironed out. A lot of the problems have now been ironed out. And I was just talking about my conversation with the Housing Secretary this morning, who told me that they're looking at a 26-day window for all clearances, environment and everything else included. Good news for you and good news for me, wouldn't you say?
Yes, certainly. I think the idea was to create transparency. The idea was to make it easier for the builder, developer. The idea was to make it cheaper and better for the consumer. I hope that the ease of doing business, which is the end objective for all this, is really going to happen. It will be really a great day. So I think first, highest marks on the issue of transparency. Now the ease of doing business needs to be examined very, very carefully, and that comes through very quickly.
Mr. Hiranandani, second point that I want to bring to your notice is, and this was mentioned by the Minister of Urban Development, Mr. Venkaiah Naidu, in the Rajya Sabha. He said that they're looking very strongly at creating infrastructure status for affordable housing. He said it can't be done unless there's a regulator for that sector. Once the regulator is passed, that's the first move the government will make. So infrastructure status for affordable housing will actually allow this sector to raise funds at affordable rates. Do you think net at the end of the day we'll be able to create more supply for affordable housing? People will be able to buy homes and afford homes?
The point is very simple. Once you focus on a sector and really commit yourself to it, I think anything can be achieved. Infrastructure status is a step in that direction. Interest rates is a step in that direction. Ease of doing business is a step in that direction. Bringing about transparency is a step in that direction. So I think what they really they should call it is a housing revolution, so to say. So if this regulator status appointment can be a beginning of a change that has to take place. And also there needs to be rationalization of taxes, because everybody wants to tax the industry both over the table and under the table. So I think that also needs to be controlled. So I think if the regulator comes into space, this will be really the first step in the direction, so we can congratulate the government for it.
The other thing, of course, that I want to bring up to you, and I'm told we have Om Ahuja on the phone line as well. Om, I want to bring this question to you also. The minister brought up the fact that while they're crunching the time taken for clearances, they're also going to, through the tribunal, bring down the time taken to resolve disputes within the sector down to, he said, 60 days or less. This will possibly also speed up a lot of problems, because right now when something goes to court, there's a stop work order that happens and construction comes to a grinding grinding halt, and that causes a lot of delays. Mr. Hirandani, do you believe that if disputes can be resolved in 60 days or less, that we can actually start, moving construction a lot faster than is happening right now?
The average time for getting buildings approved with environment and others have increased from 2 to 3 years. So as far as Maharashtra is concerned, the Devendra Fadnavis has put a step in the right direction. But ultimately, all this has to be proved on the ground. If that does take place, I think the issues would be much better. The issue of the amount of finance needed for such projects now because of this escrowing of the accounts by 70% is a challenge, especially for companies which are leveraged. So I don't know what's going to happen to those companies. But otherwise, I think ultimately, as we said correctly, it's good for the end consumer as it stands today. But the other thing which Mr. Venkaiah Naidu has said, doing everything in 60 days, I would give him a big clap to say that this was something industry was looking at. Infrastructure status will also help long-term funding to come in, especially when we are doing new townships in the country, the 100 new towns that we are really going to do, and also the locations like Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor, Navi Mumbai, Naina, and other projects that we are talking about. I think there will be a signal flag off for such projects.
Mr. Hirandani, very quick question to you. From the way you run the finances on your projects right now, let's talk about your Thane project. Let's talk about the 600 acres you're developing in Chennai. I know you're raising funds at about 12 or 13% as an interest rate. This escrow account, how drastically will it change your finances at this point? For a developer like yourself, what sort of a difference will it make on the pricing?
I think the pricing of the product will go up by about 50 rupees. I think on an average, but that's a guesstimate today. We cannot say really how much it will increase, but around 50 rupees a square foot could be an average increase in prices if we build this to the end consumer. However, if the time for getting the sanction does come down drastically, as has been suggested by the Honorable Minister, then of course that would be compensated and in fact the prices could come down. But we have to play it by the year to see what actually happens on the ground.
All right, that's a very interesting piece of information. The fact that the escrow account might actually increase prices per square foot by about 50 rupees. That's a word coming in from Niranjan Hirandani. I want to take the same question across to Om Ahuja. Om, that escrow account on one hand will give buyers a great deal of comfort to know that 70% of the money they're paying for sales is cannot be diverted, has to stay in the project, has to be used for construction. But in terms of actually bumping up prices, do you think that's something that you'll probably see at Brigade as well?
Well, I would say a very simple way to look at for a common man is that the transparency in the industry will improve, and there will be a lot more aspects which will be covered under the bill, which primarily talk about how pre-launches will be very, very clear in terms of how the pre-launches will happen or they will not happen. That's how internationally the function happens. In terms of costing, very too early to talk about it because there are a lot many other factors of compliance cost which one needs to factor in. It's not just the utilization of money which is to be parked in the escrow account, but there will be a lot of other compliance costs one needs to factor in at this point of time.
All right. I also want to ask you about the fact that, while cost is a big factor, there are several other things, like I was just talking to Niranjan Hirandani about, there are several other efficiencies that will be brought into the system. Efficiencies on dispute redressal, efficiencies on, clearances that will come in faster. Do you see this on a longer term, crunching down the time taken to construct a project, and is that a benefit that you'll be able to pass on to customers?
Absolutely. I think this is a huge positive for a home buyer in India, primarily keeping in mind a lot of fly-by-night operators will be out of business after this regulatory bill comes in. And this will create a real important space for people who are serious in business rather than people who just talk about it. The most important part of this regulatory bill primarily is to see that how states implement it faster. It's again, each state has to find a regulator and appoint a regulator, and that is the turning point in this bill, and one needs to see how fast it happens. And industry is only worried that it should not become one more window for taking an approval. So we're very, very happy to hear the ministers talking of a time frame for approvals on all aspects of it.
Well, obviously, the other conversation that happened in Rajya Sabha, and this is a question that I'm going to take to Niranjan Hirandani as well, is the fact of discrimination. And they said you must include, a lot of the opposition parties said, please include a clause in this bill that rules against any sort of discrimination on occupancy or sale of a home, whether it's about caste or creed or religion or sexual orientation, that should not be allowed and there should be a law against it. While the minister has said that he will consider it quite strongly, do you believe that such a clause in the regulatory bill will actually be helpful and it's a need of the hour?
Well, in Bangalore, it's unheard of. Yes, Bombay has some challenges of this sort, but at least in Bangalore, there is nothing called discrimination when it comes to home buyers. On behalf of the industry, I can say from Bangalore and Chennai.
Okay. Mr. Hirandani, do you think that would be a helpful clause to add to the bill against discrimination?
So, yes, there are certain categories into it. There are some Catholic societies, there is some vegetarian issues, some Jain societies. So, communities do have their own thing. I think, by and large, I don't see that discrimination happening among our township projects. But yes, for small societies and others, it does happen. So I don't know how that is really going to affect anybody. But I guess there must be cases of discrimination to use. But they are very, very minor and very rare. And in Mumbai, almost not there.
The other big question here is, Mr. Hirandani, here right now, the way people buy homes, you will have someone who lives in Mumbai who's buying homes in Bangalore. You'll have someone who lives in Mumbai who's maybe buying in Pune or in Chennai or in Delhi. And up until now, we didn't have one uniform housing code across the country. Every piece actually had every state had its own regulation. Do you believe that this will actually help people buy homes in different cities?
No, I don't think so. Land is still a state subject and the states are still entitled to legislate completely separate type of laws by themselves. Only the question of direction of the regulator, and that also has to be accepted by most of the states. So while the BJP states, I'm sure, will adopt this legislation immediately, I'm not too sure whether all the states are going to accept it. They may modify it or change it, and actually a lot of other laws are also concerned in terms of approval conditions. In fact, different cities in Maharashtra have different regulations, different FSI, different control systems. They even call the approvals by different names. So I don't see that kind of uniformity happening all over the country just because of the regulatory bill. Remember one thing, the ULC tried to bring about uniformity and it was a disaster. So we really have to see that the regulator acts properly and non-discriminatorily, because sometimes the state can use such regulators against the people and developers and others in order to work out extortion laws. So, which is what happened exactly in the case of urban land ceiling. So, we have to be very cautious in empowering the regulator to see that it's not misused or abused. I'm sure it won't be, but I'm just putting a warning flag into the system because this is exactly what happened in the case of ULC law. And ultimately, ULC has to be scrapped.
Well, obviously, one of the things that's it's possibly going to stall construction for the next couple of months is every state will have to bring in their own regulator, and every building that's under construction without an OC will have to register itself with this regulator from scratch, get itself verified, and then continue to sell, if at all. Mr. Hirandani, do you believe that will possibly stall the process for a little bit until we adjust to the new system?
I think that needs to be modified by notification, because if they bring such a thing into effect, then obviously everything is going to be pushed back by 3 to 4 months at least until the regulators are appointed and people efficiently understand how the new regulator will function. So obviously there's going to be a problem, and maybe the next 3 months you'll see zero new sales.
All right, I just have one question to ask. I think I'll ask the question to both Mr. Hirandani and Mr. Om Ahuja. I'll start with Mr. Hirandani. Now that the RERA bill is passed, it's been in the works for such a long time. Do you see this driving up demand? Do you see a renewed, more confident home buyer and all the fence sitters seeing this as the time for them to come in and start cutting those checks? Mr. Hiranandani.
I think the buyer is very savvy. I think they're all going to wait and watch and see what the regulator really means and what's going to be the effect of the regulator. Like any consumer is want to do, they'll also see the reaction of each of the states in the places in which they're doing. What is going to be the net effect of all this? I think people are going to wait and watch to understand. We don't buy the house every day. So obviously there's going to be some wait and watch to understand what the states are doing. So the effectiveness of bringing the regulator into format and getting it executed quickly is a duty and job which is going to be very, very important both in the central government by Mr. Venkaiah Naidu and also by the various states. The earlier they put it into format, the better it is for everybody. So a wait and watch is likely to be there both from the developers community as well as from the consumers.
Well, my other question to the two of you, Om, I'll come to you first. One of the challenges that the real estate industry has been facing on the back end is raising funds. Mr. Hiranandani brought it up. We know that there are developers right now having to raise debt at 22, 23, sometimes 25%. That sort of high rates of interest sort of set up that industry to set up the industry and that particular developer to fail, because how does one service debt at that level? Now, given the fact that we have a regulator going forward with a few chinks in its armor, it will possibly iron out, transparency issues. Do you actually think FDI money will flow in better now? Do you actually think that we'll be able to raise funds at lower interest rates so that opening up of FDI that we saw happen a few months ago will actually result in funds coming in? Oh?
Well, I would say the companies like ours, which are listed, which are transparent already, and which already enjoy a lot of faith from the market in terms of borrowing money and being an equity partner in most of our projects, we have quite a credible names already partnering with us. The challenge comes is, why does the delay happen, or why does the interest costs, why does the developer needs to borrow at a higher interest cost? There are a lot of aspects one need to look into, whether there is a proper process being followed, or the companies are using shortcuts to raise money and use that money not for home buyers, but they use money that for buying other land for other projects. I think those shortcuts will now be curtailed. Regulator will basically be watching all those shortcuts being used by anybody, and those shortcuts will actually disallow people misusing the home buyer's money for buying land which is not being used for the project of the home buyer. So these aspects will actually be curtailed, and the most important point is greed. What we've seen is, when people want to buy a car, they will look at 10 times, they'll see the ratings of a car, which car to buy and how to buy, what is the mileage you get, what is the credibility of a service station and how will you get serviced. When it comes to buying a home, if anybody is giving a small discount or a small offer or some scheme, people just buy and don't even check the credibility or delivery track record of the developer. I think those greed factor, which at times people are not aware, the regulator coming in, there will be much more awareness that you should be cautious, you should not be using shortcuts as a home buyer. All those aspects also will be addressed. Funding, I think, is a smaller challenge rather than what we are looking at this point of time.
Okay. The other bigger problem that the industries had, which came up in the Rajya Sabha today, is that of black money. Now again, there's a portion of the industry, the portion that's listed that is selling largely to salaried people who prefer to use home loans, who prefer to pay in white. That portion of the industry will not be affected, but there is still an underbelly of the real estate industry where there is black money circulating. Do you think a regulator will now be able to reduce that sort of circulation of black money, and as a result, will we see a more transparent industry? Will we see an industry where the people functioning in daylight will actually, or the builders that are, good and strong and have good balance sheets will actually rise above the rest? Oh?
I'm sorry. Yeah, the challenge is going to be not with regard to. I don't think the current bill, whatever I know, is basically not catering to the aspect of whether the regulator has the purview of seeing whether there is a black money or not. But I guess the markets where Bangalore or most of the cities today are seeing the buyers who are basically salaried people, and 99, 97, 98% of our customers are people who are working. And very rarely you find the people working have any component of black with them to basically come and buy. buying black money primarily is prevalent in the resale market and some pockets of Delhi, Bombay. Very difficult to say that it exists to a great extent in cities like Bangalore and Chennai and Hyderabad.
All right. Okay, I'm told that Niranjan Hirandani has had to leave, but we're going to try and get him back on the channel in a little while. Quick last question to you. If you were addressing your customers and the larger audience on this channel, which is largely home buyers who want to know what the major takeaway for them is, for me, from my point of view, it's the transparency. It's the fact that all of the plans, all the permissions, all the details of finances from the developer will be loaded onto one common website, will be verified, and I can check that before I actually buy a home. From your opinion, what's the big takeaway for home buyers from this entire bill?
I think this industry primarily will grow multifold from here, keeping in mind that there will be much more a better process for a home buyer to evaluate which developer or which product one should buy rather than using shortcuts. If you could look at the channel like yours today, you will find data coming to you in multi forms and multi aspects of it. But how to authenticate that data, you will have a website and a regulator to authenticate the data today. I think that's a beautiful part of this bill, which is going to bring a lot more transparency. And home buyer is a winner in this episode. I think this primarily will keep industry intact with good players being there and fly-by-night not being there. And the funding and all other FDI aspects will only flow into people who can deliver and not people who can only talk. I think the biggest challenge what we have overcome is transparency.
Transparency. I'm told Sanjay Dutt of Cushman Wakefield joins me on the phone line as well. Sanjay, I'm standing in front of Parliament in New Delhi. This is big enough a day for me to actually fly out for just this one day to be here when something so phenomenal happened for the real estate industry and the home buyers, which is our primary audience on this channel. We have a real estate regulator. It's a momentous day for all of us. And just for those of our viewers who just came in, well, the real estate regulator has been passed in the Rajya Sabha. We just heard it happen, and we're tremendously excited because this means we have transparency in our industry. This means we have verified information available to us on the internet at any given point of time before we buy homes. And there is a whole bill that looks after you as a home buyer that has just been passed. Sanjay, massive change in the way this industry will function starting now, isn't it?
Yes. Very true. This government has delivered for the buyers, for the developers, and for the investors in last 2 years. Look at how this government changed the FDI policy in real estate and made it extremely attractive for the investor. So there is capital coming to India. But capital had certain concerns, whether the capital will be protected, whether capital will be deployed, whether the developers will build or not. And then on the other side, the buyers were concerned and they needed to be addressed. So I think this is a tipping point in the real estate industry. Other dignitary speakers spoke before, this will change the landscape of real estate. This will bring transparency. This will bring the level of trust and professionalism. Obviously, this will not happen overnight. This will be a journey. And you will see many developers who were fly-by-night operators and were creating a wrong perception of the other good developers also fall along the line. And therefore, you will see a much stronger perception of this sector, which right now is not the case. And it will become much stronger going ahead. And you will also see a reflection in sales because now the buyers will feel protected, represented in this cause. And I think this is big news and good news for this country.
Big news, good news for this country. We're also, linking up with Rajiv Chandrasekhar, who was part of that standing committee, who's part of the conversation in Parliament about the bill. Mr. Chandrasekhar, if you're with us, congratulations to you. It's a momentous day for home buyers, and this channel is dedicated to home buyers. So we're really excited about, about the fact that we have this regulation. And I know that you worked very hard, you pushed very hard to make this possible as well. Your message to home buyers watching this channel at this point on the move that's been made by the government, and it was such a healthy debate in Rajya Sabha where all parties came together and put the home buyer, the customer, the citizen first. I think it was a great day all round.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually thank the Minister Venkaiah Naidu and the government for on behalf of the millions of home buyers that we met during our select committee consultations. I thank them for doing the right thing. I think this is a bill that puts the home buyer squarely and firmly on the table. He or she does not have to be a helpless victim anymore. They are strong, confident buyers and stakeholders of the real estate sector, rather than being victims of the might of real estate builders. So this has equalized the relationship as it should be between the buyer and the seller.
All right. I also want to ask you this. There were a couple of points of contention. We were just talking with members of the industry. Sanjay Dutt is still on the phone line with us about the escrow account, which is now settled at 70%. Niranjan Hiranandani just mentioned that he believes it will take up prices by about 50 rupees a square foot because they will now have to change the way they manage their fiscal systems on the back end. I believe from a home buyer's point of view, this is a huge advantage. But is there a disadvantage there in pricing?
No, I think the red herring that prices will go up because the cost of compliance is high is making a very, very weak argument. If the government believes that builders are getting together and driving up prices purely on the ground of having regulation and compliance thrust on the builders, then the government will ensure that there is more competition. The only real long-term guarantor of affordable quality housing is to ensure that there is more and more competition, more and more good builders that are getting into the sector, more and more investors that back these good investors, good builders, and that will revive consumer confidence in the the real estate industry. You must understand today that buyers are sitting on the sideline because they are suffering from a crisis of confidence in the real estate sector. There are many buyers who want to go and buy flats, buy homes, and they are just sitting on the sideline because they're concerned about what builders will do to them. So this is a very important catalyst to even revive the real estate sector, and builders must fully support this.
Another quick question, Mr. Chandrasekhar, is of course now every state is going to have to institute its regulator, institute a chairman for that regulator and an appellate tribunal. When you were working on this bill, was there a timeline that you are looking at to have states get their regulators up and running? I know the government has been in conversation with various stakeholders, and there are several states that are preparing. Maharashtra seems on fairly close to actually being able to action this in the next couple of days. But what's the word you've received from the other states? How long can we expect other states to have their regulators ready?
Look, let's be practical. Let's be clear. Governments in the states will respond basis the public pressure and media pressure. The ball is now squarely in the courts of the state governments. And of course, part of it in the central government. The consumer now knows that he can benefit if he makes the state government move towards these provisions in the law. And so it is really up to local populations, local media to start pressuring the state governments to not dilly-dally, to move fast on reforms in the urban local bodies, move fast on all of these issues that require transparency and lack of opaqueness that are outside the bill. For example, planning approvals, things that impact the builders today. Yes. Those are things that public pressure will start making state governments respond.
All right. I want to bring in Sanjay Dutt here. Sanjay, really interesting point that the media is going to have to put pressure, that public is going to have to put pressure on each of their respective state governments. And here's my commitment. We took up the real estate regulatory bill, months ago, and we've been pushing for it. We will continue to push each state to move as quickly as possible to bring out its regulator in each state. But, Sanjay, do you think that states right now will have elbow room to sort of modify the bill and look at something that's specific to them? Because we know the state of Gujarat is looking at not bringing in a retrospective bill, but bringing in a prospective bill. Will there be some pressure, you think, from industry in various states to sort of modify the bill to suit each state? All right, Rajiv Chandrasekhar will be in a better position to answer this question. Rajiv, do you think states will have elbow room to modify some portions of this bill to suit what the state needs? Or is this a hard and fast guideline that each state will have to follow when setting up their regulators?
No, there is considerable amount of leeway for states to do their own regulation. But this bill is a bill that is a national bill that has clearly established the legal rights for consumers and the legal obligation for builders. Now, in addition to this, if a state wants to improve on this, the state is quite, it's empowered to do so. The urban local bodies, in terms of enforcement, compliance, speed of permission and transparency, can do a lot more, and they must do a lot more. And if you heard what Mr. Venkaiah Naidu said in Parliament, the idea is for this bill and this legislation to be a catalyst in improving things all the way down to the urban local body. And the Government of India plans to have model agreements, model building codes, model urban planning guidelines. So all of these things can go to the state and to the municipality, but they can then take that and either ignore it, or they can use it and improve the standard of the real estate business and the real estate consumer in their city or state, as the case may be.
You know, here's the thing, Rajiv. We're both citizens of the city of Bangalore, and Bangalore per se has had some issues in terms of management of the city, management of traffic, management of from the services from the urban local body. Now, again, while each state is going to have to take this up on its own, we've seen some states be more proactive, some states be slightly slack. Does it finally boil down to consumers and citizens and media to sort of push their respective states also on urban management?
I think you are being kind by saying some problems. I think Bengaluru is a city that is fast going downhill and is going to soon become unlivable from many ways, not just transportation, environment, sustainability, groundwater, in a number of areas that have been neglected for decades. So I think you are being kind by saying some problems. I think we are in the precipice of a disaster as far as I see it. I think it is really to do more and more with people, the citizens and the principal stakeholders of a city, these consumers of public services being louder, more vocal about their dissatisfaction. If you don't make your dissatisfaction heard, governments don't respond, municipalities don't respond. If you allow corruption to just go unheeded and be silent spectators to a widespread loot by builders, contractors and municipal councillors, then you will get more of that. So negligence and silence are both contributing to the decline of our cities and the decline of the standards of our cities. And unless we reverse that, we just will sit around and complain and have nothing else to show for it.
In fact, that was going to be my next question to you. In a conversation that I had this morning with the Housing Secretary, Dr. Nandita Chatterjee, she talked about the plans the government has, which are fairly extensive on urban development, housing and poverty alleviation within our cities. But at the end of the day, we both know that a lot of these topics are state topics and local body topics. So again, in cities like Bangalore, where we're seeing the local body sort of drop the ball and actually let the city reach down to positions where citizens are having to come out into the street and demand basic services of clean air and clean roads and garbage being picked up from the corners of their streets. These issues, while the government at the center might put out, fairly clear plans of where they want to do or where they want to go, at the end of the day, it's up to the urban local body to pick this up, whether it's the regulator, whether it's, whether it's solid waste management. How are we going to ensure that each of our states and each of our cities actually do it?
And I can give you a 5-minute answer, I can give you 10 hours on this, and I can give you 4 days on this question. This is an important question.
Let's opt for 4 days.
But at the end of the day, yeah. So I can do this for on and on. But the real key of the issue is that transparency and governance reforms in municipal local bodies has not been a priority on any political party's agenda. It hasn't been top of the narrative of any media or citizen organization, and it is high time we started talking about reforms where it really matters, where corruption is at the maximum, which is at the municipal level, where services directly impact an individual and his family's lives, which is at the municipality. And this area needs more spotlight, more commentary, more discussion, more discourse, and hopefully as a consequence of that we'll have more laws and more reforms, and we'll have modern cities. Because today the way we are going about it, we are putting money into a black hole, money is being siphoned out, assets are being siphoned out, and the citizens get nothing to show for it but decline and negligence.
Well, Rajiv, I'll tell you one thing that has changed from everything that you just listed out as problems. You said it's not top of the list priority for the media. Here you are right now on a channel that's dedicated 24/7 to housing and urban development. We take issues like solid waste management very, very seriously. We take issues like bad urban planning very seriously and air pollution very seriously. And this is my commitment to you as the editor of this channel, that we will put all of our muscle behind it as we've done in the past. But I want a commitment from you as well. Can we work together like you've worked on the real estate regulatory bill? Can we work together to push all of our urban local bodies to accountability, to push them to actually deliver the services that they should be delivering to the citizens?
100%. If you're in this, I'm quite happy to work with you. I've been doing this without much support for a few years now, and I'm glad that you're up there wanting to join the fight. So let's do this together. I'm happy to do this.
All right, I really appreciate your time and your commitment. Rajiv Chandrasekhar there worked really hard on the real estate regulatory bill. Thank you so much for joining us. Also on the phone line with me, I'm told, is Uday Vavikar. Uday, congratulations to both of us. We now have a real estate regulator. Congratulations to everybody who's watching right now. If you're a home buyer, you now have a real estate regulator, someone to look out for your interests. Uday Vavikar, lots of things we were discussing last night on the regulator have been cleared up by the minister himself this afternoon in that conversation in Rajya Sabha. Hugely, hugely positive for home buyers, isn't it?
Yes, yes. I appreciate, in fact, I am happy that consumer courts are kept. I am happy that people can go to the court. I am happy that penal provisions are maintained. I was doubtful about it, though I made a presentation to select committee. I am happy most of the formats of the Maharashtra Flat Ownership Act, Gujarat Flat Ownership Act have been picked up. On some Hyderabad Flat Ownership Act also is picked up. Model agreement is coming in. Some uniformity to a great extent is happening. Because if you see the northern states like Haryana, or for that matter Gurgaon, or for that matter come down to Delhi or any other northern state, there was no MOFA, no COFA, there was no controlling authority. Even in Maharashtra and Gujarat, there was no specific monitoring authority. I think this RERA is going to be really a trend-setting step which this government has taken towards the real estate industry. To bring about the controls in real estate industry, to bring about the transparency in real estate industry, and to bring about certain amount of discipline in real estate industry, and the consumers can actually get most of the data online now. With the land record being online and computerized and digitized, I think much more revolution would come. The real interest in real estate will come in, and this bill is, I would say, this is a great step. But again, woods are lovely, dark and deep, and we still have promises to keep. Today, the projects are registered. I had recommended to the select committee and 70 member of parliament in Bombay as well as in Delhi that builders, the developers also must be listed. They must be registered and licensed and accredited. I think that step we are moving towards.
You know, Uday Vavikar, I want to talk about the legal aspect. I also have Sarita Pal, who's still with me, and he represents hundreds of home buyers in the NCR region as well. I understand he also made a representation to the standing committee. So I want to ask you this. You know, up until now, and this is, break it down and make it as simple as possible so everybody can understand this. Up until now, if I had a problem with my developer, whether it was a delay, whether it was, you know, a delivery problem, I approached the Consumer Court with advocates like Uday Vavikar, who's the Vice President at the Bar of Maharashtra and Goa. How does that change starting now? With appellate tribunals coming up in every state, what changes, Sudipta? How does this process change now?
See, the process of raising an issue is going to all remain the same. The only thing is now that you have lot of control over the projects. So if there is any violation, then one has to raise issues specific to those. And consumer courts will act the way they were doing. Now they will have more.
Consumer courts, in all fairness, took 4 or 5 years to get to get a verdict out of it. And for someone who was already facing a delay and paying rent and not getting their house delivered, another 4 or 5 years in consumer court tended to be a little stressful. Does this new regulator and the appellate tribunal bring down that time?
I think it would, because there's already a time limit of 60 days by which has to be redressed. This is one. Secondly, I think when the law is very clear, then litigation also takes lesser time. Litigation takes more time where there is an issue of interpretation of particular statute in a manner in which they do it. And if you leave too much of the law, has to be very tight. That's been it has to be very simple. Everybody should be able to understand it, and regulators should be able to implement it quite strongly.
All right, I want to come back to Uday Vavikar. Uday Vavikar, the problem obviously which you and I we've had this conversation on this channel in the past. The problem is of consumer court taking so long. Now there are appellate tribunals, consumer court also available. Is there a problem of infrastructure? Will the appellate tribunals have the ability to solve problems in 60 days?
Yes. Hello. Hello. Hello.
Yes, Uday Vavikar, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Uday Vavikar, quick question to you.
Yes.
Yes, I can.
Consumer courts have infrastructure problems. Government must support consumer courts to replace the city civil courts now, and it's more needed. But at the same time, there are provisions of interim relief in the consumer courts which act very effectively, because against an order in an interim relief also, you can send a builder or developer to the jail under Section 27 or recover the amount by Section 25 by the properties. So there's a big weapon given to consumer court.
I want to ask you this, Uday Vavikar, I want to ask you this. Now, the minister has given a commitment saying the appellate tribunals will resolve disputes in 60 days or less. Will the appellate tribunal have the ability to do so? Because it requires infrastructure, it requires judges with a keen understanding of the real estate sector. Will each state be able to deliver on that promise?
When the Consumer Act came in, if you see the directive principles of the Consumer Act, it clearly states that 90 days the matter should be over. Unless the matter is ex parte, it takes average 4 to 5 years. So these principles remain there unless they are supported equally by, as you rightly put it, ably equipped judges, ably equipped infrastructure, ably equipped the entire machinery, and the minds of the people and the advocates taking date or representing them. The things would not happen. It would only happen when we do digitization, and the consumer courts are now moving for digitization. You will be happy to note that Maharashtra is the first state where online filing of the complaints have already started. And they have outsourced. I mean, one company has come forward free of charge. They did the package. Testing is going on. But government should do more outsourcing. Government should support digitization, and the things will be fast. Still, we have a long way to go.
For home buyers, we've just had the best day ever. The real estate regulatory bill has been cleared in Rajya Sabha, which means that we now have a real estate regulator. All of the problems that we faced across the country when it came to buying homes, an industry that was not transparent, an industry that was not forthcoming with information, an industry that had black money circulating, it was too expensive, it was out of reach, delays, problems in plans, problems with promises that were not kept. All of those things can now be solved because we have a regulator to look out for our interests as home buyers. With me on the phone line, Pranay Vakil and Uday Vavikar are still on the phone with me, and I have with me the Home Buyers Association. We're going to come to the association in a bit, but Pranay Vakil, congratulations to us on the real estate regulatory bill being passed. It's something we've waited for a really long time. It was done also in such a healthy, mature manner where all of the parties within the Rajya Sabha came in together. to put the customer and the home buyer and the citizen first. And a lot of the issues that the industry was worried about got ironed out as the minister himself spelled out a lot of the solutions that he's offering. So it was handled really well, and I think the bill in its current form will actually bring a sea change in the way we buy homes. How are you viewing this big change?
Well, I think it's a step in the right direction. It has taken almost 5 years, as you rightly mentioned, for this act to actually become effective, to be passed as an act. There are a few things which should have been done, which are not done. I mean, a lot has been done. Let's not kind of take away the credit of having done a lot of things. But the biggest problem we have in the real estate is black money. It doesn't seem to have addressed that to its fullest extent.
Okay.
How are we going to eliminate black money?
Right.
And what are the clauses which will prevent it from happening? Right. That part is not clear. Secondly, if there is a building under construction which is registered, and if there is a change of FSI, how are we going to address that issue? Does that new FSI belong to the existing buyers, or does it belong to the developer? Because, as you know, I mean, in Bombay City, the new act is about to come. The new DP regulations are about to come. There will be changes in FSI and stuff like that. So what happens in the interim is something which needs to be kind of addressed. And again, I think the entire act is a little bit residential centric. It doesn't fully cover the commercial office space. As when in fact, everywhere it's referred to as flat, even if they are referring to an office space. So it is meant essentially for the home buyers, and I think that's what they've tried to do. It's a step in the right direction. There are a number of clauses. There are restrictions put on the developer on how he can use the money. I think all of that is really welcome.
All right. I have to acknowledge the fact that I do have the Home Buyers Association with me. I'm going to ask them one very quick question before we have to wrap up this show. Ajay, you've been fighting for this. You all have made repeated trips to Delhi to have conversations with the Urban Development Ministry to sort of push this. Big day. Congratulations to you and the hard fight that you've fought so far. But to all of the other home buyers, and I have to wrap up the show quickly, so I'm going to ask you to keep it brief. All of the other home buyers and, people who have been aggrieved by the real estate industry watching at home, is this current form of the bill, in the manner in which it's been passed, is this the answer to all our prayers?
I think to a large extent, yes. I think it's impossible to have one single bill address problems across the entire country, which is actually 29 countries in one country. Yes. And every state has a specific problem.
But now every state will have similar rules. Up till now, we've had a different set of regulations. At least now they'll be uniform.
Definitely. So all I'm saying is the problems are unique very often. So the same solution cannot apply to all problems. Right. But to a large extent, I think there's been a lot of effort the Select Committee did, where they've taken inputs from us and all the stakeholders. And that's why this is a fairly holistic bill. Like the Minister said, it has scope for improvement, which will happen, but it's a really big day and a big relief for all of us.
So, one of the things we were worried about is, it being derailed by the fact that there are small ifs and buts that have to be ironed out. But the Minister rightfully said, let's bring in the regulator and then we'll iron out those problems. So, Pranay Vakil was just telling us that he doesn't believe black money has been addressed. But, given the fact that we will have more transparency, black money will sort of be weeded out largely from the system, won't it?
Well, the fact that he's made a clause that 70% of the money has to go into escrow account, largely transactions are plot land, transactions are in cash and solar land. So, and that itself, and the Minister said that he's addressed it.
Okay, don't leave. I'm going to hold you here because we're going to come back to this conversation. But I'm going to. I need to wrap up this particular show. We'll continue to stay live. We'll continue to stay on the big story on Magic Bricks Now, which is the real estate regulator. Don't go anywhere.
All right, thank you for that, Faye. It is a big day for home buyers here, and that was a big day. The real estate regulatory bill has been passed. It's a historic judgment right there. With that, we have to wrap this show, the news on Magic Bricks Now. Stay tuned with Magic Bricks Now.
You can watch live TV on our website mpnow.in. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/magicbricksnow And don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at Magic Bricks Now. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/Magic Bricks Now.